Hi, welcome everyone to our part two of the API governance workshop. Really appreciate Dr. Baljeet and Malhotra for agreeing to continue this. We had a great session a couple of weeks ago on the first one, and he was very gracious, he and Nicole, to come back and continue this because we had a lot of questions and participation, which is great, but we just didn't have time on the original session to get through everything. So we're going to pick up where that one left off and continue on today. Today's session is being recorded, just as we sent out the link to the recording on the first one, as well as the slides. I will send a link to these as well. So you'll get a link to the slides and to the recording, just like we did for the first session. And I'll post those out there on the chat for anybody that didn't see the links before. I'll put them out there on chat in just a minute. But we will have to conclude today about 5 minutes before 1 p.m. I have another call that I have to host. So, so my apologies for that. But if you stay on until 12:50, you will get 1 CPE credit for today. And so since we're going to have to adjourn quickly, I'm not going to take up any more time. So Dr. Baljeet, I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, thank you from the chapter for agreeing to do this for us.
Thank you so much, Ted. Can you hear me fine? Can you see me okay?
Yes, yeah, we can
Okay,
see. I
great.
see your slide, and I can see the miniature version of you on here, and then I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Once again, good morning, good evening. I believe it's a good evening, your time, or rather afternoon. And I'm back with more content and more scenarios that we couldn't cover in the first workshop. And we are very thankful to Ted and his colleagues at ISACA Houston, Greater Houston chapter for inviting us back. And really glad to be connected with the audience again. Great questions again. Please let's this session also be lively. So we welcome your questions and any queries that you may have during the presentation. I'm joined by my colleague, Nicole. She's on the call as well. She'll be monitoring the chat. So please feel free to ask us any questions while we are presenting. So let me start. Since you know me, I skipped my bio. Hopefully some of you guys were in the previous workshop. And we started with the overall API ecosystem evolution as it is happening at the global scale and within enterprises. So I touched upon different aspects of API economy, how APIs are evolving, what underlying risks they pose from a security and compliance perspective. So today's session is again as part of the bigger picture, but very much focused on the due diligence aspect. How do we actually do API risk assessment? In particular, we will use a technique called software composition analysis that is very well known in the industries. You might actually already be aware of that. And as a matter of fact, you might actually be using certain tools as part of your due diligence process. But let me briefly go through the agenda. What are some of the other elements of this workshop? I will try to keep it very hands-on again, and I will show you demonstrations, examples, and as a matter of fact, I will share certain tools with you that you can download for free and start to use them and see how some of these due diligence scenarios that we will conduct today. But as far as the agenda is concerned, I will talk about why do we need software composition analysis? How do we actually do software composition analysis? So I will share some tools, including some of the our community-driven tools that you can download from our platform as well. But most importantly, I will take some examples. For example, I'll take a piece of code, either from GitHub, or I will upload that is available on my laptop, or other sources that you can imagine. And I will conduct a software composition analysis on that piece of code to show you various elements of risk assessment, how they can be performed. In particular, I will look into security aspects, I will look into licensing aspects, and hopefully that will enrich your experience with already experiences you might have as part of your practice, or your professional experience. As Ted requested, I will try to wrap this up by within 15 minutes from now, so that I keep 5 minutes for the Q&A, because Ted needs to leave 5 minutes before the actual time. So let me start with some use cases around software composition analysis and why actually we need software composition analysis. I'm not actually going into the details of what exactly software composition analysis is, but as you can imagine, the name itself represents something you do to the software to decompose the different elements of a software so that you can conduct some sort of analysis. And in many ways, this is also connected with some of the pointers I provided last time, where I talked about software bill of material. So software composition analysis is a technique by which you analyze your software or source code or binaries, by which you can see the various ingredients of the software. And based on that, you might be able to look into vulnerability issues or licensing issues, or other aspects of that software. Why this is needed is actually represented in this use case. So here is a chart that represents a scenario where a developer is, very proudly, deservingly saying that, look, I'm able to build a mobile app in 5 days simply because I was able to use an open source library that already had these Facebook or LinkedIn API integrations. So that really accelerated my application development scenario, but somewhat there is a problem. And that problem is highlighted by another developer colleague, which asks, did you use our open source or library, or did you use some sort of a legacy application that you were not aware of? Obviously, the scenario here is, if you are not aware of the ingredients of the software itself, then analyzing it becomes difficult, simply because, if this is a one library, two libraries, then it's okay. But if this library is hundreds and thousands of lines of code, or in whole, if your application is millions of lines of codes, it becomes very difficult for you to do the due diligence manually. So the risk here could be, the developers may not necessarily be aware of what are the implications of using this open source library. What risks Facebook or LinkedIn APIs may pose from a compliance perspective when these APIs are integrated. Many of these APIs are publicly available for free, but free does not necessarily mean that there is no obligation. Now, let me share the perspective from a leadership perspective. Now, this was a scenario which was dedicated from an application development perspective. Let me show a scenario of software composition analysis and why the need arises from a leadership perspective, where a bunch of auditors are involved in some audit that is happening in an organization. And the general counsel, or the person who's responsible for the legal aspects of related to these audit practices, they are saying that in order for us to be GDPR compliant, all our data needs to be in a particular location. Okay, for our, here in this example, I'm just saying that there is a Eurosauce app, which is basically targeting certain customers in Europe. And because of certain restrictions, all the data needs to stay within a specific geography. Now, the technical team, which is helping the leadership team as part of the due diligence process, they are wondering, oh, my goodness, we forgot to validate our third-party APIs that are integrated in that app. And although this app is serving our European customers, we don't know where these third-party app APIs that are part of the application, where exactly the data is being transacted. Again, the application is there, but the APIs could be part of that application, but these APIs may be hosted in the US or in Canada or anywhere else. So the lesson learned here is the team is figuring out we have roughly around 30 million registered users, and maybe there is a sign-up process that is enabled by this API. Maybe there is data that is communicated through one of these APIs, and that API is not necessarily hosted in the region where this is supposed to be. And as a matter of fact, they're struggling with where exactly our disclosure around APIs are, especially the third-party APIs. Let's not worry about our own internal APIs, but the third-party API integrations that we have done. So you can imagine in this situation, not knowing your APIs in your applications could lead to certain uncomfortable situations during this process. Now, why software composition analysis? As I already highlighted in the previous use case, that your enterprise application may evolve to become very complex. You may have internal APIs, you may have external APIs, you may have APIs that you did not know. Now, this is the slide I took from my previous presentation, but this was really important for me to connect the dots here. Now, your applications, as you can imagine, and perhaps you agree with me, that the applications are very complex in the enterprise world. You have one component, you have other integrations, you have acquired assets, and these applications may have evolved. So there may be different languages that support this application. The data may be hosted in different places that needs to be connected. So all these scenarios actually force enterprises to have this hybrid ecosystem of APIs. Whether they like it or not, but that's the situation, or that's the state of the art in today's enterprise applications. Now, if this application was simple enough, perhaps you can do this kind of due diligence in a manual way. But as I mentioned, these enterprise applications could run into millions of lines of code, and these could be legacy applications. And there could be all kinds of situations where just doing things in a manual way, in an unintelligent way, would not scale in an enterprise. So what do we do? So we do software composition analysis. And how do we do it? We do it in a way that I described in the previous workshop as well. You need to have a process in place where you shift left. What do you mean by shift left? Now, it might be already too late by the time your application is already built and operational and supporting customers and all of that. So shift left means here that as your application is being developed, you need to provide and empower your developers, empower your teams to do certain things from get-go where you can control your API inventory. So basically, scanning your applications by shifting left, by providing within the development environment, either scanning your repos or your applications within the ID environments, that's where you start. But as these applications go on a journey of integrations, the code gets evolved, and still, the application as scanning may not necessarily be useful. So you need to scan these applications at various stages. Maybe you need to do some sort of a dynamic scanning when the application is actually running to actually see what was detected during application development is actually indeed the case when the actual application is running. So you need to do all these due diligence. But again, coming back to the software composition analysis, as the application is being developed, you must perform analysis on the source code, what APIs are being integrated, which ones are internal, which ones are external or third parties, and also what data they are going to transact. It's especially if these APIs are not are built by the developers who are actually developing the application, then it becomes even more difficult or challenging scenario. So to sum this up, we perform software composition analysis to have a better control on your API inventory. And this helps you with certain legal obligations that might actually be enforced upon organizations moving forward. For example, the recent presidential order I mentioned the last time, where companies are required to produce their software bill of material. And APIs are essentially some important ingredients of software applications. So your software bill of material will not be complete without disclosing your APIs. So to sum this up, software composition analysis is needed. You need the tooling in place. You need the processes in place. You need the training in place to empower your teams to conduct this kind of analysis to get a better handle on the APIs that you're using. Now, I'll give a quick pause before I start sharing any scenarios. So let me turn back to Nicole and Ted. Are there any questions at this stage that you can point out that you see in the chat window?
Dr. Baljeet, I don't think we have any at this point. Again, if anyone has questions that you have, please put them in the Q&A panel. If you're using a browser and you, instead of the Zoom client, and you don't have access to the Q&A panel, then please put it into the chat and make the first word all caps question, just so it flags us and we can pose those to Dr. Baljeet Malhotra. And I did, just FYI, I did put the links to the recording of the first session, as well as the link to the presentation that Dr. Baljeet Malhotra used last time. And again, we'll be sending out the links for today's session as well. But the main thing is, if you have questions, feel free to post them. But I think at this point, Dr. Malhotra, I think we're okay moving on.
Great, thank you, Ted, for a great explanation. So I will move on and start sharing some of the hands-on scenarios that I've prepared. In order for me to demonstrate that, I encourage you to go log in. Some of you have already created your accounts. I saw the last time. So if you have already created your account, simply go to this link I provided. I will put it in the chat window one more time.
And while you're doing that, Dr. Malhotra, we do have one question because it was related to what you were just talking about. Are the API tools, are those open source? Are they proprietary?
The platform itself is open platform, so anybody can log in. There are certain tools that we have made open source that are available, but there are certain data and certain pieces of software that are proprietary. But as far as the user logins and the access to the platform is concerned, they will always remain available to the community members that have signed up today.
Excellent, thank you.
Without any cost.
Can't beat that.
All right, thank you. So thanks for clarifying that. So let me put that into the chat window. Looks like my screen is not being shared, but I'll share that in a minute. So I put the link in the chat window, and I will start sharing again.
Yeah, I can see your link in the chat.
Great. So I'll just give a minute or two for everybody to sign in if they haven't signed in yet.
So again, the link's in the chat, everyone. If you are inclined, you can click on that and log in, and that way you'll be able to follow along.
So here is the link. I'm sharing my screen again. Since I already have an account, I will simply log in.
Yeah, and I can see your screen, Dr. Malhotra.
Thank you, Ted, for the confirmation. I'm logged in. And the tool that I'm talking about is actually listed under your resources. If you're seeing my screen, let me actually make this bigger. So if you're seeing my screen, you will see my resources, API Discovery Scanner. This is a client that I'm talking about that I'm going to use. I have already downloaded. Once you download it, make sure you unzip it. And once you unzip it, you will see a GUI tool that you can double click to start. So once you double click and sign in, it will give you a login window where you can sign in using the same user ID password that you created. Excuse me. So this is essentially the same tool connected to the platform where we will perform the due diligence. This client is essentially designed to perform the scanning on the client side. Here you will see in a minute, I will scan a piece of code. We will try to pick it up something from GitHub. You know, there are a lot of interesting projects on GitHub. And the scenario that I will demonstrate is the same that I talked about here. So which screen you are seeing, I'm not sure if you are seeing the client.
We see the API Discovery Scanner GUI, the one that has that tab.
Okay.
And it's got the steps listed.
Okay. Do you see scan project, update project?
I'm not seeing that, I don't believe.
Okay. I'm actually sharing one screen. I'm trying to figure out how do I share my entire screen. So just give me 1 second, please. Let me see.
Sure, no worries. So while Dr. Malhotra is doing this real quick, I'll just let everybody know we we are seeing a lot more attacks on these APIs, or APIs utilized for a lot more attacks. So really, again, appreciate Dr. Malhotra doing this, because this is a rising level of concern that we're seeing, especially around ransomware, et cetera. And, one of the things that we're also seeing is that the ransomware malware now is they're beginning to go in and be able to actually attack your backups. So they'll look at certain software that's used for backing up your systems, and then they figured out ways in order to compromise those backups where it looks like the backups are occurring, but you would not be able to recover from them. And so what they're doing is, once they gain access to your system, they're able to corrupt those backups, and you'll go along for 2, 3, 4 months, and then they'll attack you And then when you go, oh, you know what, I don't want to pay the ransom, ransomware, the amount that they're asking for, I'll just recover from my backups. And what you'll find out is that the backups are corrupted and you won't be able to back up from those backups. So again, this unfortunately is just a race that continues to evolve, but it does highlight these APIs are a serious vulnerability. And I think, as we talked about last time, I think a lot of times they're overlooked. So
Yeah,
so
that's a great context, Ed. Yeah, please continue.
no, I was just going to say, all I see now is just a white screen.
Okay, I am struggling to see how do I share my entire screen because I'm switching back and forth. I don't see an option to share my entire screen. How do I do that?
Let me look real quick, because normally you can. I'm looking to see where they maybe have moved it. Because
Yeah,
normally you can do it.
yeah, I'm surprised because it gives an option to share your screen, and then it gives you the option to share your individual screens, for
Right.
example, the browser or PowerPoint. I don't see an option to share my entire screen.
I know, I don't either. And it used to be right there, and I'm looking to
Hmm.
see, um, if,
That's all right. I guess what we'll do is I'll switch back and forth between different screens.
okay.
And instead of looking for a perfect solution, we'll just work with what we have right now. So I'm hopeful that you guys can see uh, my dashboard where I was trying to explain. If you go to API Discovery Scanner section, you can download this GUI tool that is highlighted on the right-hand side. And once you see that, once you download it, um, your GUI tool, once you kick in, will look something like this. So this is the GUI tool I was talking about. This is where the scanning will take place. And once again, when we are done scanning, we will switch back to the dashboard again, where we'll see the results of the scanning and we'll perform the due diligence. So let me start. If you're seeing my client, so without wasting too much time on this, I think it's relatively easy to understand. I'm going to scan an application. Now, it doesn't really matter whether this is my open source, this is my enterprise application, is this open source, or this is enterprise application or proprietary code, doesn't really matter. So what I'm trying to do is I will scan something from the GitHub and basically perform the software composition analysis for the purpose of discovering APIs and then performing due diligence on those APIs. And the scenario, again, if you try to remember my pictures or the use cases that I was trying to describe, where developers may download a library for certain functionalities or features they want to develop in the application, but they may or may not necessarily know the APIs that might be integrated in that application or the library they downloaded. So that's the scenario. So what I'll do is I will basically go to GitHub and so I'll use a library which is very popular called OKHTTP. This is a library contributed by Square. And this library is popular in the sense that, a lot of projects use them for, building their communication channels. A lot of mobile apps use this library for developing various functionalities related to communication. Now, I'm not saying that you can only use this library or you cannot use other examples, but I'm just taking this as an example. But you are welcome to try any other application that you want to scan. Either you can take it from GitHub or from your internal repos, or if you have a zip folder of your source code, you can basically scan from there as well. So let me take the link of this repo and switch back again to this client. Now you're seeing my client where actually I can provide all these details here. So here, the first thing is this tool or any other tool that performs software composition analysis, you need to point where your source code is. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm providing that pick up my source code from GitHub, that this is the application or this is the library I want to use. Let's call this, I don't know, let's call this ISACA project. Okay, and vendor, we can say Square. Library, we can just say one. Doesn't really matter. These are some pieces of data that you attach so that you can organize your projects in a unique way. Because you might be scanning multiple projects. Maybe you want to scan this programmatically or automatically as your applications are being built. You don't want to do this manually. So all those scenarios are possible, and you want to organize your projects accordingly. So here I have started the process, but I forgot to mention one more thing, which is really important to understand. Now, any application that you scan, if you have the basic knowledge about that application, for example, is it a Java application? Is it a Python or shell script or whatever? The more understanding you have about this application, tools can perform better job. Because at the end of the day, these tools, including this particular API discovery tool, looks at certain pieces of metadata for discovering the API risks. Now, if these tools are not language agnostic, then they have restrictions what applications you can scan. But in this particular scenario, we have chosen that my application may contain Go, Java code, JavaScript, or Python, but you can see some other languages can be supported by a tool or this tool. So this was important aspect to mention here. Now, once I locked my setting that what application I'm scanning, and since I had the understanding by looking at this application here, I quickly checked their the GitHub repo page where it says 49% is Java, and there is some JavaScript as well. Now here, as I said, I'm going to provide some metadata that is needed for me to organize the scanning of the code. And the last piece of information I needed to provide was the link where my code is hosted or code is available. So I think that's what it is. And I kicked in the scan. As you can see, the scanning will be performed. And as the scanning is performed, I'm switching back my screen to the dashboard again. So here's the dashboard from where I had downloaded this tool under my resources, API Discovery Scanner, which performs the scanning part. And the results of that scan are populated under my results and API scan projects. So here you can see different projects that I've performed or that I've scanned are being populated here. Now, this is the project I just scanned. You saw I created a project called ISACA Project 1 with vendor name 1, Project 1. I'm the one who scanned it. This is the timestamp when I scanned it. And I just received the notification that my scan is complete. Now, all these steps are important from a due diligence process perspective, because your application may be very big or large in terms of number of lines of code. So depending on how vast your application is, the scanning could take some time. So as part of your due diligence process, you want to build mechanisms which allow you to, provide as much intelligence and automation as possible. So that's what we did here. So you see that my scanning is complete now. The status is complete. And now I want to see what results we see in this during this scan process. So basically now I want to see my bill of material of this particular application that I scanned. So I click there. You will see a bunch of APIs that are listed here. Now let me explain to you step by step what exactly this software composition analysis step did at this stage. Before I do that, some pieces of metadata that I'm sharing here. This is the repo I scanned. I scanned it. The scan is complete. When it was scanned, the reason is your applications may evolve. So you need the time dimension, you need the other aspects of metadata so that your due diligence always remain up to date. Now here, let me explain the software bill of material based on the software composition analysis that I just performed. Now here you will see I am showing Google URL shortener API, GitHub APIs. If I go to other pages, then I see Slack APIs, Twitter API, and so on and so forth. I can increase my display screen and show more results just for better visual. So if I scroll this down list, so you'll see a lot of GitHub APIs, but I also see some other interesting APIs that I've found in this application that I scanned. Now, here is the fun part that starts now. Now, obviously, telling you that this application has a GitHub API, of course, you are not very concerned. What else you can expect? GitHub integrations might be there because you're checking in your code, checking out your code. Your application is evolving. But now you're curious. Okay, what is Slack API doing there in this application? What is GitHub? The Twitter API doing here? That's also not very surprising because, as I mentioned, this application is all about different integrations for communication channels, and maybe they're providing different integrations to Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, because this is a very popular library that is used for those integrations. Now, what else you can do here, apart from showing that this is a Twitter API, this is the endpoint that is being used, that's the version, if it is available and whatnot. But let me show you something more important. You want to see where exactly this API is actually integrated, because it's not just you want to rely upon machine to say that, okay, these API integrations are there. Maybe these APIs are deprecated. Maybe they are not necessarily being used the way you want to use it. So providing that kind of code snippet to better understand that integration is also very, very important. For example, if I want to see, okay, show me where exactly this Google URL shortener API is integrated. So here you can see in this particular file, which is request body compression.java, it is showing that in this piece of code, that's where the system has discovered this Google shortener API integration. Now, some of the other observations you can make immediately is, whoever wrote this library or this application, one thing that was good was they didn't hard-coded API keys and passwords and whatnot. At least in this particular file, I don't see that. So they have provided, they have used good practices to pass on these variables. So anybody who downloads this library, they have to customize it. They have to use their own API keys and whatnot, which will authenticate the APIs that are being used by this API or this library. So now all these different aspects are very, very important. So you are able to do it. That's good. You can do this for this entire software bill of material that you have discovered. Now, oftentimes, it could be the case that the tools, including this one, I mean, this is also not a perfect tool, it may discover certain metadata that it may not be able to verify which API is that. For example, in this particular file, you see that the system is not able to tell which vendor is this. But if you look at this particular file, which is this guy, there is a hard-coded IP address. Now, is it serious? I'm not sure. It may be just that the developer of this application is trying to indicate you need to provide your specific server information, or whatever this functionality of this particular routine is, or the function is. But nonetheless, it is important as a due diligence, part of your due diligence process, to pay attention to these unconfirmed discoveries as well. And oftentimes, you may end up in a scenario where you will say, okay, I confirm that these APIs are being used. I verify them. I have verified them, and we are all using these APIs. However, we are not using, this is something we are going to deprecate. This is something we're going to deprecate and whatnot. So here, let me actually perform that task. So approve. Apologies, I did something wrong. Okay, so you can see that my status of these confirmed APIs is being reflected here. Now, certainly, some of the other discoveries that I made that I was indicating, I can say, reject them, because machines are not perfect. So you can see some of these discoveries are rejected. That should show up here now. Okay, so you can see that these ones being rejected by me. Now, this is an important lesson for us, that no matter what level of intelligence you built in, these solutions will have their limitations. And as the world of APIs is evolving, it is possible that this tool's knowledge base is always catching up. So all these scenarios emerge because of those reasons. And therefore, keeping a human intelligence into the loop is very important. You cannot simply say that, okay, whatever has been discovered, confirm it. But again, you can provide so much automation in the beginning where at least I did not go and looked into the application manually, line by line, code by code, snippet by snippet, file by file, to actually do that discovery. So I've already cut down 80–90% of my work and automated that, where I can do this kind of due diligence. And of course, rely upon the machine, but not completely or blindly trusting it. So once you're done with that, now let me go back to the dashboard here. Now here you will see that my review status is in progress, right? My approval status is not complete because I never completed the review process and said, okay, now I confirm this is approved. So you can imagine, as part of your due diligence process that I've showed on the slide, so somebody may scan it, you're the engineering team or application team, they may scan it, the managers or the due diligence process or the professional that is responsible, or the product manager, whatever the role is, they're responsible for approving, so they can do that. And you will see here in some scenarios where my status is complete here, the review process is complete, and so on and so forth. So you need not only the intelligence, but also the workflow to manage your software composition analysis for API risk assessments. Now, without losing track of software composition analysis, I want to move to the level or to the part where I want to show now why we did the software composition analysis. Now we want to get into the API risk management, because until now we have solved the problem that I need to know my software bill of material, in particular to the cataloging of different APIs in my applications. Once I do that, that was 50% of the job. The rest of the job is, okay, if there were certain APIs I discovered that I did not know what they were doing, now I want to do the due diligence, what those APIs do. But before I get to that scenario, which I will try to wrap up in the next 5 minutes, let me give a quick pause to see if anybody has any question.
I'm not, let's see, I think, well, so I don't think there's any questions at this point, Dr. Malhotra.
Okay, so I will continue then.
Yep. Thank you.
So now what I want to do is I want to show what perhaps I touched upon during my first presentation. So any API that I have discovered in any of these applications that I scanned, for example, in this one, now I want to perform some sort of security assessment or a legal compliance assessment, look at their vendors, and look at where exactly these APIs might be hosted and whatnot. So let me pick one particular API and perform that kind of analysis. So here I am showing you that this API may be hosted in the US by Google. Obviously, this is a Google API in California. So now I'm assured that this particular API will be transacting data within a certain boundary. Furthermore, if you recall from my last presentation, I can take one of these APIs and I want to perform my security due diligence. For example, I want to run my authentication or authorization test cases, which means that basically I want to see how robust this API is. And once I perform these tests, I want to see what test cases have been passed, what test cases have been failed, and I want to create a report which may look something like this as part of my due diligence process. So here again, I will go back and quickly show you once I perform these security tests. I want to know the report card of this API. So basically, I can generate a report something like this, and I will be paying attention to this guy and look into more details why this test case failed. This does not seem to be serious. All this is telling me is, or this particular use case is, by the way, these are OWASP top 10 API specific cases. And this particular case is telling me that this API is transacting certain sensitive data, or it might be exposing certain data, maybe people's name or email or credit card, depending on how did you define your sensitive data information. What does it mean within your organization or context of the application? What does sensitive data mean? Because name or email may not be sensitive in certain aspects of application, but credit card may be. So you want to define, you want to have a dictionary of those terminologies. Once you do that, you basically conclude with the last step, that is, let me change my screen again. So you want to perform the last step, which is recommendation. So now let me capture what I presented through this scenario again. So I showed you a tool. You can use that tool from the API Discovery community platform that I shared to scan certain applications. Doesn't matter what application, your open source libraries, your enterprise, or whatnot. Then I showed you how did I identify the different security and legal risks with that API. Then I showed you, I did not necessarily show, but I explained that you need to have tracking and alerting mechanisms as these applications are evolving. You need to be informed. For example, the alert I showed where I was being informed that my application scanning is complete. Now, if you perform certain security test cases, you don't want to wait to run these test cases manually every day. You check in certain APIs, you perform certain tests, and you wait for the test results to come and all that. You want to automate as much as possible. So certain alerts could be related to which API test cases failed. Once you have those reports, the one report I showed on one particular API, you want to make certain recommendations. For example, if it is leaking certain data, you want to go back and work with the application team or the engineering team to see certain fields that you want to deprecate that were not necessarily required or should not be exposed. So to sum this up, I showed these 5 basic steps of software composition analysis process that you can put in place within your enterprise to make your applications more secure, more compliant, disclose your inventory or software bill of material in a way that makes you, that makes your application more secure and compliant with various processes or procedures in place. Now, if you're interested, just a few comments about us. So if you're interested to know more about how we do this, I encourage you to reach out to Ted or my colleague Nicole, who's on the call. We'll be very happy to answer any additional questions that you have. This is the contact information. And as I promised, I want to stop here to see if anybody has any question. If not, Ted, feel free to provide some more insights from your side and any other questions or comments that you have for us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So, so I'm not, let me see. I don't know if I'm seeing any questions right now. I don't think we have any questions right now. So again, just as a reminder to everybody, we will be, we did record today's session and we'll be providing you the link as well as a link to the presentation. If you didn't get that from session 1, it is out in the chat, so you can go grab it real quick. I'm going to ask your permission and graciousness to go ahead and conclude. I have to host another webinar right after this one for my company, not for ISACA. So, but I do appreciate everybody participating. Dr. Malhotra, any closing comments you want to make for today?
I just want to say thank you to you and your colleagues at ISACA chapter. And I also want to thank the participants who took the time to join us. Of course, whoever received their CP credits, congratulations to them. But also I want to thank them for their interest in this topic. Nicole just typed in our contact information in the chat window, and we will be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. And Ted, once again, thank you. And we look forward to joining again in the future events. If you are invited, we'll be more than happy to participate.
Absolutely. I want to thank Dr. Malhotra and Nicole. They've been a pleasure to work with. They made this very educational. I'll tell you, some presenters make it more of a commercial than others, and they did an excellent job of not doing that. And I found it very educational. So, and to do it complimentary for the chapter is very gracious of them. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude it here. Thank you again, Dr. Malhotra and Nicole. Thank you to our members. You will be getting a CPE certificate. We're going to send out a cumulative one for the last session that Dr. Malhotra did if you were a part of that. and then for today's too. So thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you. Don't forget our members meeting is on Thursday, and we have our Saturday privacy session on Saturday from 9 to 12. I put those links out in the chat as well. Thanks everybody. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Have a good day.